right, so we're back with Evangelos Simoudis. His blog is at corporateinnovation.co. We are recording this on the morning of February 6, 2026. Episode notes with all the links to the articles or resources that we'll talk about are on the dataexchange.media. Hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So let's jump in. So the first topic is autonomous vehicles, of which Evangelist is deep in the weeds in. But our goal here is to give you a quick update as to where things are. So let's start, Evangelist, with economics and financial viability. So we're in San Francisco. We see Waymos and Zooks all over the place. So what's the economic situation in terms of these robotaxis?
So I think we need to start from saying, how did we crack the nut here? So I think robotaxis are becoming more prominent, and we see them in China now. There are 3 companies there. We see them, obviously, as you said, in San Francisco. And I think what makes a difference is the so-called end-to-end AI, which is a very different model of how I use the input from the sensors that the vehicle has to the output in terms of how the vehicle is controlled and is moving. And this approach, which is being now increasingly adopted by everybody, including Waymo, is starting to make those vehicles more capable in operating in increasingly larger geofences or operating design domains. So from an economics perspective, what we need to start thinking now about is what is the cost per mile versus what can be charged per mile, and what is the cost per vehicle, right? I mean, we hear companies ordering larger and larger fleets. Uber, for example, has ordered 30,000 vehicles or so from Lucid. We have Waymo ordering several thousand vehicles from Zeekr and Hyundai. So again, fleets are, same thing is happening in China.
So just to clarify, so for our listeners, they associate Uber with human drivers.
So Uber is taking a hybrid model. And I think, again, that comes to the financial viability of this, because the Uber, which a couple of days ago released their quarterly results, they said that they believe that in certain cities like San Francisco, they may have a hybrid fleet, namely both autonomous vehicles, robotaxis, and human-driven vehicles. In other cities, they will have just human-driven vehicles, right? But that, again, will have economic implications both to Uber as well as to the drivers of Uber.
So, Evangelos, so in the Uber case, are they doing an experiment, or are they confident that in certain geolocations they can do some autonomous and that autonomous will pay for itself?
I would say Uber is experimenting with different models, and I have written about the various models that are possible here. But in Atlanta, for example, in Austin, they're starting to offer rides using the Waymo autonomous vehicles. By the way, a big unknown here, to the economics, is what Tesla is going to do. Tesla here in the Bay Area and in Austin, they're starting to test their robotaxis. I mean, in Austin, now they have them without the safety driver. But the other day, I was walking around Menlo Park, and I saw the Uber robotaxi, that specialized vehicle, gold in color, just to stand out, that Musk announced about a year, maybe a little over a year ago. So as these come to production and they start being deployed, I think the economic model again will have to change, because Musk has very much a manufacturing edge. Also, the vehicles they don't use the panoply of sensors that the Waymo vehicles and vehicles from other providers use. So it costs a lot less for the Tesla robotaxi compared to the Waymo robotaxi or the Pony AI robotaxi in China. So again, those will impact how we see the economics.
On the Tesla side, Evangelist, as you mentioned, they don't use LiDAR and a bunch of these other sensors, which brings up safety concerns. But set that aside,
Tesla doesn't use. Sorry, just to make sure, doesn't
use it, which
Yeah.
Affects at least my personal confidence in taking these cars, particularly when it's raining or foggy or whatever, right? So set that aside. But the other thing that people might not be aware of, at least on the Waymo side, is that there's still human operators and we don't know the ratio, right? So a human operator might be overseeing 5 to 10 vehicles. We don't know that number. So first of all, as your based on what you know, does Tesla use human operators? And secondly, on the Waymo side, is the plan to kind of increase the number of vehicles per human operator to make the economics work?
Yeah. So again, there are a couple of issues or a couple of drivers here to the economics. Teleoperators, if you call them human operators, and that ratio impacts. Insurance impacts a lot. Recently, Lemonade, which is an insurance company, accepted that they will take the Tesla's data as a way to reduce the premium, the insurance premium. Which obviously is very important for companies like Waymo, for companies like Uber that want to offer that. So I think that teleoperators will remain a reality and a necessity in this at least for the foreseeable future.
Question: is Tesla using teleoperators?
I think they are. There's no way that Tesla is not using teleoperators.
But publicly, they have not admitted.
They have not. And look, again, I think whether you use a Tesla or an Uber or a Waymo, eventually will come to trust, right? I mean, so there are people who use FSD daily as if it is a level 4 driving automation capability. Others, including many people much smarter than me and much more embedded in the autonomous vehicle ecosystem, they say it's not, right? And they push back on that. So, but people, I think they're about 12%, somewhere between 12 and 20% of Tesla owners also license or have FSD, and they use it daily, which is a pretty remarkable number if you come right down to it, right?
So what do we know as far as the economics of Waymo in a restricted area like San Francisco? Still losing money, right?
Still losing money. I mean, they recently, just earlier in the week, they raised 16 billion, of which 13 came from Alphabet, but other companies invested, which to me means number one, that they are losing money. They need the money to accelerate expansion, particularly both domestic expansion here in the U.S. as well as international expansion. As they have already announced, and they're now testing in London and Tokyo. I'm talking about Waymo. I think they would like to expand in more cities around the world. This is more of competition both with Uber, but also with the Chinese. Chinese are very active in the Middle East. They want to get into Europe and Southeast Asia. They're testing right now in Singapore.
So is there a bit of a blitzscaling and flywheel effect here, Evangelos, in the following sense, right? So you're Waymo, you're losing money in San Francisco, but the more you drive, the better your service becomes. But in the meantime, you just expand like crazy to other locations, kind of like what Uber did in its early days, right? So it was a loss maker, but then it kept expanding just to blitzscale.
Well, I actually think that again, if we go back to the to what differentiates autonomous AV10 from AV20 is the fact that now, starting with Waymo, they have realized that their model works well enough. So going from city to city doesn't require the extensive testing and mapping that they used to rely on before.
So can you so Waymo, when it first launched in San Francisco, I noticed it in my neighborhood for years driving around, and then they launched. So now what you're saying is if Waymo were to launch in another city, there's not as much.
They still do some reconnaissance, let's call it, a mapping of the routes, but they don't do it to the extent that they used to do it because, as I said, and the same thing goes for Tesla, right? I mean, if you look at FSD, whatever 14.4, 14.5, which is whatever the current version is, it has improved dramatically, both because of the data they collect, obviously, but also because of the models that they use, the AI models that they use. So I think that, and to me, this is the big leap that differentiates 1.0 from 2.0, to use your terminology.
But I think the fact that Waymo and Zoox and the other autonomous vehicle companies are using multiple sensors and LiDAR means that they have a richer data stream. So they are able to build a richer world model, so to speak, right? So
they are able to.
Do we know this? We know this because basically they can drive even when it's raining, it's foggy, all sorts of conditions. Whereas if you just use computer vision and cameras, I mean,
and radar,
yeah.
So I think the big question mark that exists right now in the industry is, does LiDAR, I mean, just to put it down to brass tacks, as they say, does LiDAR give me better information to allow me to drive more safely under any condition than the lack of LiDAR? Because again, if you look at Tesla, they use multiple sensors, not as many types of sensors, but they still use multiple sensors in their vehicles. And so I think that's the big differentiator, if you will, right? And obviously that differentiator impacts both the cost per vehicle, how quickly you can equip a vehicle, you can put your stack, in other words, in the vehicle, and whatnot, because and that impacts economics. Yes.
And I guess the question, as I understand it, then is, does multimodal and data variety give you an edge, especially when in less than ideal conditions? Assuming that cost is not an issue, because I believe that the original objection of Elon to LiDAR was it was expensive, but it seems like LiDAR cost is going down substantially.
It has dropped precipitously, absolutely. But again, as you say, you get another data stream, another type of data, data typing. I mean, that has computational costs. It has all. Look, I say, and I've said this publicly, I've said it privately, that I believe that the extra safety that LiDAR gives you because of the data that it collects is important, and it's important not only for the actual movement of the vehicle, but it's also important for the peace of mind that it provides to the passenger of the vehicle. But it's not a panacea. I mean, look, earlier in the week, we had this accident in Santa Monica where a Waymo vehicle touched or hit or whatever you want to term it a young kid that rushed into the road, into its path. Waymo maintains that this was their vehicle stopped a lot faster than a humanly driven vehicle would have stopped. But I think we need to face that even with LiDAR or whatever, there's only so much that
Yeah,
this data.
there's no system that will be 100% accident proof, as they say.
Exactly, and that's why the so-called trolley problem
Yeah.
was earlier on was much more popular in the press than it is now. But I think that's a clear demonstration of that conundrum that the vehicle has to make.
So before we move to the next topic, let me try to wrestle you to the ground on this question again. So the economics of self-driving cars right now, are you bullish?
I think I will put it this way: we are improving. I think we know which levers we need to operate on. You see it in the cost of the stacks that these companies put, the vehicles that they use. I think we're compressing that. I think if Tesla succeeds, that will make a very big dent in the economics. So I'm optimistic. I don't know if I would call it bullish, but I'm optimistic. I think we're taking the right steps. And I think as more people become more comfortable using these vehicles, and we can use these vehicles for longer rides to places like airports in particular. I mean, Uber said 15% of their rides are to airports. Now I can take Waymo to San Francisco Airport, to San Jose Airport, and it takes me through the freeway. I don't have to go through surface streets as was the case before. So the more comfortable I become in using Waymo or Robotaxis in general for those kind of routes, the more economically viable the model is going to become for the providers.
And just to end this topic, Evangelos, right now, the three players, at least in the US, are Waymo, Tesla, and Zoox.
I would say that the Waymo is the only player that has really deployed in multiple cities. I think Tesla has deployed in Austin, in Austin, and is doing pilots in a few other cities, including San Francisco. And Zoox has deployed in Las Vegas in a very limited geofence, and is testing San Francisco. But I think that if you were to look at kind of like multi-city deployment, I think it's Waymo. In the US, Waymo is the only game in town today.
All right. So then now we move to the next topic, which is going to be basically based on an article I just wrote called The Data Center Rebellion is Here. And for our listeners on the podcast, I'm putting air quotes on data center rebellion. This was inspired by the fact that, Evangelos and I are based in San Francisco. We live here. We live and breathe AI. And abstractly, we know that AI relies on data centers, but that's just an abstract concept for us. But it turns out my in-laws live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So I traveled there a few times a year, and I started to notice that there was local opposition to potential data center there. I'm not even sure if it's AI related, but and then I started reading up on the topic, and I noticed that lots of local municipalities, there's opposition to these data centers. And there's reasons that I lay out in the article, right? So roughly speaking, electricity, noise, and water are the three kind of main reasons, right? So, and each of those, have, you can go into the details in the article. And the other thing that's interesting about what's happening is that it seems like there's starting to be a decentralized network of these local groups. So these are very hyper local groups. So in other words, the issues in Sioux Falls, South Dakota might be not 100% the same as those in Chandler, Arizona. But it turns out that these groups are starting to share lessons for how to stand up to the developers of these data centers. And then a couple of economic things here. One is that in some municipalities or locations, there might be some backroom dealing happening. So then these data centers just get added to an agenda of a local board of supervisors meeting. It surprises people. I think that's kind of winding down. I think a lot of these developers know they can't get away with that kind of surprise act anymore. And then secondly, I think subsidies, right? So in the beginning, there was a lot of, we'll build a data center in your location if you provide us tax breaks or whatever, right? So it's similar to the sports stadiums back in the day. But now, of course, local municipalities have grown wise to the fact that the sports stadiums never actually pay for themselves. So
actually, before you were saying about autonomous vehicle 1.0 versus AV 2.0, and I would say that we're starting to see a little bit of that in data centers, because when Bitcoin mining was a big deal, we would see municipalities where mining data centers were being established complaining about that. Of course, Bitcoin mining never became as big as AI is right now. We never saw the kind of capital investments. I mean, Amazon yesterday said they will invest 200 billion over a year, right? I think Meta is at 75 billion, and Alphabet is somewhere in between. Anyway, I mean, these are staggering numbers, but I think which make the problem even bigger.
And then the other thing that's happened is that so there's this tax subsidies that I think people have gotten wise to. That's not a good deal for the local municipalities, and largely because the tax subsidies in some ways are premised on the fact that we're going to bring a lot of jobs, but then it turns out as we know, there's not a lot of jobs in data centers once they're built, because you have thousands of servers being maintained by 20 people, right?
Yeah. Look, I talk a lot in my when I talk about adaptive robots, I talk a lot about dark spaces, right? So we will see dark assembly lines, we'll see dark industrial kitchens, dark warehouses. And I think that data centers are moving in that direction. I mean, you need a little bit of supervision, but compared to the size of these structures and the power that they handle, both computational and electric power, the number of employees they have is minuscule. And I think that this is something which, again, communities need to understand, and also not only communities, not only at a city level, but at a country level too. I mean, because there are many countries that want to entice, for example, Microsoft or Amazon or Google to build data center in their territory.
Because they think that somehow makes them part of the AI revolution, right? So
exactly.
In some ways they are, but then they're also, I hate to say this, but there's might be some taking advantage of some of these countries as well. Now before we started recording, you mentioned that this opposition to data centers is not U.S. only.
No, I think, look, people are starting to realize what it means to have this type of a data center, as you wrote in your article, and it's other people have written as well. Utility prices go up. More importantly, water rights. I mean, I think one of the differences between the, let's call them vanilla data centers that are running any type of enterprise software workloads compared to AI specific data centers is that the AI data centers are extremely dense. They require a lot more power. The GPUs consume a lot more power. Water cooling is necessary compared to air cooling. And water cooling, given the densities, require a lot of water in places that do not have a lot of water a lot of times, right? I mean, I'll give you an example. Athens, recently there was a report, they have 1 year's worth of water. And Johannesburg, the same thing. I mean, there are parts of the world that are, because of climate change in particular, but also because of other, even industrial agriculture consumes a lot of water. That's becoming a problem. I mean, Florida, you mentioned Florida in your article. Yeah. Florida has an aquifer problem, right? Yeah. I mean, the aquifer has been depleted a lot faster than people projected. And now you put data centers onto AI data centers in particular, and that makes the problem worse.
Yeah, yeah. And in cooling, there's no free lunch because you can either have water cooling, which Evangelos just points out leads to water shortages, or air cooling, which just shifts the problem over to electricity, which is already a problem with data centers. Now, and then the big looming question, which is too big a topic to discuss today, we might do it next month, is that the question of overcapacity, right? So in the article I wrote, I linked to a seasoned analyst of the utility industry where he basically lays out that actually the grid operators have already have projects online to add electricity and grid capacity to accommodate so much of these data centers that it's not clear if we're and then as Evangelist points out, the economics are still not there. So are we going to end up with a lot of these ghost infrastructure? just like in the Bitcoin era, as Evangelist pointed out, there were these data centers for Bitcoin that became kind of
yeah, and they're now being some of them are actually being repurposed for AI workloads.
CoreWeave was Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, that's right. So look, I think that what is, I mean, I have
so if
said,
you're a local municipality, what's your advice?
Well, I think if you're a local municipality, you really need to really understand what you are giving up for and what you're gaining. There's no other way. And as you said, both in your article and earlier today, transparency is important, right? Your citizens need to understand what they're getting themselves into and whether they're willing to tolerate that. I mean, here in the Bay Area, we
don't have data centers.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, try to convince the people in Woodside, for example, to put a data center in their backyard. I mean, it doesn't, or Palo Alto for that matter, right? It won't happen.
Yeah.
I think these are important issues. And the other point, which we covered in one of our previous conversations, Ben, is we need to think about this also with regards to the half-life of the AI chips.
Yeah.
And if we need to be changing and upgrading these chips every 3 years, couple of years, depending, what will that mean both to the energy needs of the data centers, to the impact that they have to the environment, to the water, whatever. So I think it calls for a much broader conversation in terms of how fast we should be building. I mean, it's not only do we have the power, right? Can we supply the power? I think that I believe that we'll find a way to do that. I mean, look at what
Yeah.
Google is doing with small nuclear reactors, right?
And like the utility analyst said, we have enough power. And also, a lot of the models are based on this current generation of chips, but the chips themselves are getting more energy efficient.
They are getting more energy efficient.
So the modeling is kind of off right off the gate, right?
The question is how quickly each data center provider will be able and willing to replace the chips they already have with something more efficient, and how would that compare to the needs, right? I mean, there's demand, there's supply. I mean, that type of equation, we still have not reached some sort of equilibrium. We're still testing what we need and what we have.
By the way, the one thing, and we'll close, we're closing this discussion, but the one thing that I wasn't that aware of was the noise pollution. Because at some level, obviously, you kind of know, you walk into a data center, it's loud. But I thought for some reason that they had technology to put that under control. But I guess it is an issue for some of these areas.
Well, I mean, if you have this kind of fans or those kind of machines working, it's very hard to put the noise under control, right? Because these places, even when they're supplied with power, they have auxiliary generators that are typically mechanical devices, right? I mean, they're not these are not just a chip.
Yeah, and then obviously in the back of all of this, looming above all of this is the geopolitical race with China, right? So the idea that the US may have all the chips, but China has a command and control economy, so they have more electricity and infrastructure. So there is this psychological need in the US to keep building out these data centers to keep pace with China at some level as well, I think.
I think we have more than chips to be proud of, frankly, on AI. But broadly, you are correct. I mean, there is a huge war coming. I mean, that is taking place. War within quotes. Competition, maybe it's a better word, more appropriate word. And we still have not seen a lot from other places which are just waking up to the opportunity. The European Union being one. Middle East being another. I do not know what Southeast Asia is going to, whether we want to do. I know Singapore is thinking very seriously about how to.
Yeah, Malaysia is building a lot of data centers.
Yeah, so I think that this problem is not going to go away, or this issue is not going to go away. I think I think more and more countries are starting to at least think, if not act, on what it means to have their own sovereign AI. And sovereign AI doesn't mean I have a foundation model, but it means I have the hardware infrastructure and the power to do it, and I'm self-sufficient for my needs. And that, I think, calls for much bigger questions. Our firm is dealing with some of that, but I think we'll see a lot more during this year.
And with that, we'll catch you back next month. And again, go to the dataexchange.media for links to the articles.